services and kind of preserve the health and safety of people who do use drugs, which is a much larger number of people than most people think within populations. Drug use tends to be this thing that is perceived as hidden in many spaces. But when you look at some national data, we estimate that in Wisconsin and Dane County, roughly like 7 to 8% of our population reports at least using some sort of street drug monthly. And so when you look at those numbers, that's really between about 35 to 45,000 people that we would estimate live in our county who are likely using drugs regularly. And again, there's a lot of health and safety implications of that. So my team does a lot of work to make sure people can recognize the signs of an overdose, whether you're just a bystander in public, because there's always an opportunity to intervene and potentially save someone's life. So we do a lot of Narcan training, but we also have our syringe services program, and my staff can tell you a lot more about that and what that looks like. But one of the most important things really, again, is being able to intervene if you think someone is overdosing. So that's why we're really happy to be here today to present the Narcan training, especially with all of you being in the field and working with as many people as you do in the community, and knowing that overdoses happen in public spaces a lot more than we think. So again, we're really hoping you guys can take this information, apply it to your work, and if you have any questions or need to connect with us again in the future, we are here. So I'm gonna stop and turn it over to Kathy and company to get to the meat of it.
Oh, meat. Hello,
Yes.
everybody. Kathy Andrews. A lot of you look familiar to me. I've been around kind of a long time, since 2005 with public health, and I've moved around, been shunted around kind of a lot. I think I'm one of the members of the smaller club that have worked in every single office we've ever had, even ILO, if you remember ILO or EHO, near the airport. And I'm finally ending up here at the South office for most of my week. And I'm really excited that you guys were interested in learning more about Narcan and how to use it. I feel like I haven't had a lot of opportunities to talk to my coworkers about what I do, and I can talk about it. I'm pretty passionate about it, so I can talk about it a lot and go into like real detail and stuff like that, because that's what I find interesting is the detail. But I'll try to hit the most important points today, and I'll rely on my colleagues Lisa and Julia to jump in when I can't quite grasp the word I'm looking for, or if I'm missing something that's important. And I want to respond to what you're interested in too. So if you're curious about something, or you didn't quite catch it, or you want to ask another question, just feel free to like wave your hand, and we can be interactive that way. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. And hello, everybody in TV land who's watching me in the future. Hello, future. We're sorry you couldn't be with us today. So our overdose team loves, and syringe services, we love this graphic. So we try to use it as much as possible. But it's a rainbow because in many cultures or mythologies, the rainbow is sort of the symbol of the promise of the future. And well, I'm not sure what you guys might think, but syringe services harm reduction is all about making choices for the future, not looking at the past so much, but thinking about positivity and for the future. So we love this, and the message, of course, is just be alert and save lives, because that's the most important thing. So I could go on to the next slide. I'm not going to work on my slides too much, mostly be interactive, but I have a few things. So the overdose fatality review came out with a really great report earlier this year, which is really, really beautiful, actually. It's a beautiful report for some pretty heavy work of reviewing the drug overdose deaths in Dane County from people who reside in Dane County. It's a numbers report, and it's also the individual fatalities were reviewed in an anonymized way by a small group of people in depth. So, but what I want to just make clear, the report is on our website, and it's really worth a look because a lot of work went into it, and it's really really important. But there's a lot of numbers in there, and there's a lot of percentages and things like that. But each one is a person, and and each person who died of an overdose was loved. It's important to remember that. There's a lot of stigma, of course, around drug use, but every person was loved, was a daughter or son, child of somebody, a brother, a sister, an uncle, a friend, a coworker, somebody who had relationships in the community, is an important part of the community, and is a loss. So I think that's an important way to just set the ground for what we are going to talk about. So this is the introduction page to the overdose fatality review. So I'm just echoing that. They're reminding people that this isn't just numbers or percentages. We're talking about real people who had important lives. So next slide. So this graphic is showing the increase in deaths from overdose that were related to opiates. And over here is the year 2000. And here's where I joined public health. That's not on the map for some reason. But as you can see, it's a pretty steady decline, steady increase over the years. And pretty precipitous at the end as we started getting into the pandemic. The most recent complete year we have right now is the year 2020. Is that correct? We don't really have anything for 2021 yet?
Yeah, we do have preliminary data for 2021. It's still preliminary because it takes a little while for all of these autopsy reports to be completed. We do know from what we would call kind of our conditional data for 2021 that we surpassed this number in 2021. And so like Kathy said, these are the ones that are opioid involved overdoses. There are more overdose deaths that occur that don't involve opioids. So not to steal Kathy's thunder, but in 2020 we know we reached the highest number of overdose deaths we've ever seen in Dane County. This is pretty true nationally as well, that these deaths have been increasing, and we know we surpassed that number in 2021. So we're hoping that we'll have that data complete soon and be able to provide an update, but just know like it's not a problem that is decreasing. If anything, it is increasing.
Thank you, thank you. Let's see, so the way I try, when there's a need to, when I try to put that number of 123 people, these are people whose addresses are in Dane County, so it's not just people who traveled in from somewhere else and passed away while they were in Dane County. These are like the Dane County residents wherever they died. So for me, I think of that number 123 from 2020, I think of that as about 10 per month, and so then I further divide it and I say it's 2 or 3 people a week, which is, so it's basically every couple of days someone's dying, so some resident of Dane County dies of an overdose. So that's a lot of people, and it has a huge impact on the community in general, and then whatever small subset of the community that people belong to, whether it's their families, their neighborhoods, or the community that they know from the community of drug users. So it's a huge impact. I think that's all I need to say on that. Okay. I just wanted to put in, I think this is probably pretty much illegible to most of you unless you're sitting in the front, but this is a monthly snapshot that we often share, like in the e-update or whatever. This is a monthly snapshot of our syringe services program, which has also way increased in volume and use for the number of visits for our program. Pretty much every month this year, and then going back, I mean, every month it's just more people. So right now for July, we're up to 681 visits. And then the monthly average this year is about 658, and then that's about 110 more per month average than we had in 2021 even, and that was a record year, and 2020 was a record year before that. So
and just to mention, like when Kathy says that, that means that that's 681 client encounters in the month of July. So it's not like year to date, that's just for the month of July. So sometimes, like at East Washington office, Lisa or Kathy may have encounters with 40 to 50 people per day. We do have days that are a bit busier, so like Monday, Thursday, Friday are much busier days for us. The middle of the week is a little slower. But just again, to put that into context, we have data that goes back several years. So we can see how much this is increasing, and June of this year was a record for us where they were close to 800 client visits in the month of June. So just to give you guys an idea, we do interact with lots of people every month, and I think that's probably the big takeaway.
Yeah, I think so too. And we are also much busier at the East Washington office than we are here at the Atrium office. It's always been that way. It's about, like, at best, it's about 2/3 of the visits are at East Washington, and about 1/3 are here at the Atrium. There's a lot of, like, physical environment reasons for that, location, all that kind of stuff. I think that's pretty much all I want to go into on this. Do you have any questions so far? Like, anything you're curious about, or go ahead.
Are syringe services available at, like, community centers or other places not public health related?
Oh, who else does syringe services? Yes, there's an organization called Vivint that used to be called the AIDS Resource Network of Wisconsin. I had a couple other names. It's on Williamson Street, the 600 block in that mall there. And they do syringe services as well. In fact, they were the first, and then we started basically supplementing their work in 1996 at the health department, supplementing what they do. They also have they have a van, and they do mobile services. So that's a service that a lot of people need. And so they do that there. We currently have a satellite site of community pharmacy. They were a satellite site for the other agency years ago when they were on State Street, if you remember when community pharmacy was on State Street. But they got gentrified out of their building, so now they are on Fair Oaks, not that far from our East Washington office, but they have the ability to be staffed, and they're open later, and they're open on Saturdays. So they just do basic syringe services for us. So does that make sense?
Are there any that seek out marginalized communities or, like, outlying communities? Or are they all based in Madison?
Vivint has locations throughout the state of Wisconsin, Beloit, Milwaukee. I mean, there's probably about 10 locations that they have in the state of Wisconsin. But yeah, I mean, they tend to be in urban centers, and that's sort of strategic in the sense that no matter where a person lives, they have to obtain their drugs somewhere, and there are more sales of goods and services in urban areas and high trafficked commercial areas. That's one of the weird reasons that East Washington is such a high volume hotspot, because I mean, you can just drive down East Washington and you see there's a lot of commercial venues. There's tons of goods and services for sale, both licensed legally and non-licensed, illegal goods and services for sale. So that's a great place to be located, because it's where people are obtaining their substances.
And I think, just to jump in to your question, Molly, like, yes, there's a gap in reaching rural communities or people who are not, like, located in the urban centers. Like Kathy said, the drug trafficking routes tend to go along those, like, urban major transit corridors. We've mapped overdoses, like public overdoses, in the past, and there's a lot of them really align when you look at the maps of those major transit corridors and drug trafficking routes where you see public overdoses happen. So we also know that there is a gap. Like Kathy said, Vivint does do some mobile syringe access, but it's not a big portion of what they do. And we know from the people we talk to who come to see us that some folks are traveling quite a ways, or they may come a couple of times a month because it just happens to be when they're in Madison and getting kind of a large supply. So we also know that we get clients from throughout the state because they don't have any access to these services where they live. So yes, we try to make efforts to reach out to the outlying communities, and we know there's still a lot of work that could be done in that space. So
thank you.
I could just add, so syringe services, agencies that hand out syringes is what we're focusing on now, but if you look at Narcan, giving out Narcan, there are more
Yes, thanks, Masami.
Go ahead, Marion.
Does public health have clinic, like office locations outside of Madison, or are those all kind of in?
Oh, public health, yeah, Dane County, or public health locations are, as far as I know, primarily in Madison. Yeah, I know public health does, we have, the atrium, and we have the city county building, and we have the East Washington office, and that's it for us. And even, social services, the only office that's open, I believe, is, actually, I don't think there's any outlying locations, it's just like the job center on the north side.
Yeah, there are some like joining forces for family offices that are outside of Madison, and I know we have some of our like community-based public health nurses who are embedded in other locations, like in Sun Prairie. Katie Peterson is in Sun Prairie doing a lot of work, but again, like we said, there is certainly a gap in being able to reach some other parts of the county. As we have some grant funding to try to expand syringe services and do some more outreach, those are things we're trying to talk about, like how can we get more in those locations, whether it's trying to co-locate some things with maybe a mobile COVID vaccine or testing pop-up that might be happening. Like, what are those opportunities for us to be out there? Because as I think Kathy and Masami have both said, syringe services, we do more than just syringes. It's the first thing that's in our name, but we do a lot of education and training about safer drug use, about how to use Narcan, fentanyl test strips, and these ladies provide a lot of connection to other services. We get a lot of questions about recovery and treatment services, medication assisted treatment. So, we do have visits where it's just a quick in and out, people want supplies and want to go. We have a lot more visits where it's, you are the only person that is a friendly face to this individual. You're the only person that, gives them a non-judgmental space. They may open up to you about traumas they're experiencing or seeking help. You might be the only person they trust to go to with those things. And we also hear a lot from people who have used Narcan like repeatedly to save a friend or a family member, and kind of the toll that eventually that takes on them. And you may be the person that they're talking to and want to express those things to. So it's kind of bigger than just supplies and getting materials out, but they're also serving as hubs for our community partners, agencies that want to get Narcan to their staff. So we also do a lot of kind of supply distribution as well. Schools, security companies, recovery coaches. Like, there's a number of people that we're providing Narcan and fentanyl test strips to, and training all of these organizations of how to use them. So yeah, it's a pretty big operation really that's happening with a fairly small team. So
That's okay. Other questions right now? Or anything about location, or? Go ahead.
You had mentioned that there's an increase in terms of deaths within people that reside within the county. Is there also data showing people coming from outside the county that die within the area? I mean, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but is there also an increase in terms of visitors?
Well,
coming
there's an
into
increase
the
in
area that-
there's an increase in overdose deaths, like in our county, in our city, in our state, in the nation, in the world. So yeah, everywhere, everybody's dying. But as far as like gathering the data, we collect what we have access to, I guess, people who have a Dane County address. Is that right?
yeah, and we can also look at, say, like calls for service for police, ambulance, fire, and hospitalization data for anyone who's utilizing those systems within Dane County. We tend to kind of pull some of that out a little bit and focus a little bit more on the Dane County residents, just because it's our service area. But we do have that information. I don't know it off the top of my head, but we know that usually, like we talked before, drug trafficking routes and patterns, there are, things that may happen in other parts of the state that we know, this is gonna get to us in a matter of weeks, and vice versa. So we try to build more of a like regional dialogue with other health departments around us. Columbia County is one where they're like, if you're seeing it in Dane County, it's gonna be up to us just very soon. So we've had some spikes and overdose spikes, and usually we see these a couple of days apart. So, you know, do I have the data readily available? Not off the top of my head. Do we look at it? Yes, we look at it. Next slide.
Janice?
Yeah, so, I don't know if I missed this part, but, they're more happy with the youth than what age group is this overdose affecting?
There are more deaths in the 25 to 49. That's where the most deaths are concentrated in sheer numbers. But yeah, they happen all over the age spectrum. But the concentration is in not in under 24s. It's in like 24 to 49, right?
Yes.
Also, are people getting on these opioids because if they had an injury and because they, the pain was so severe, so the doctors just keep giving them these opioids, and now it's time to get off of them, and they're just addicted to them, so they can't get off of them? Or is it just, they're just experimental drugs out there, they decide to use these things, you know that?
I would say yes, all those things. And opioids have gotten cheaper because, I mean, I'll get into like fentanyl type of stuff later, but years ago, like heroin was a plant that had to be cultivated and grown in special conditions. The plant itself and its seeds were highly visible and regulated and stuff like that. But opiates are now manufacturable, both in, you know, pharmaceutical companies and in labs, you know, homegrown labs type of thing. So it's relatively easy to manufacture. It's inexpensive, and so a product that is inexpensive is going to be more popular than a product that's really expensive and hard to get, right? So really, it has to do with access. And Lisa, you look like you wanted to jump in.
And I can't remember what the current data shows, but I know back a few years ago when I was doing some opioid related research, I think like half of the people, their story was they started by being introduced because of like an injury or something, and they got prescribed them and then continued. And I don't quote me on those numbers, but I know like a big portion at one point that was how they got introduced, and then they just kept using them. I think that's changed a little, like you said, as it's like easier to get them, that it's not always the story, but there are a big chunk of people where that is the case still, so.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is that there's a lot of different things and factors, and it's a very complex situation that leads someone to use drugs. And again, some of these, you know, fatalities, these people who have died in our county over the last year that Kathy's been referring to, their stories all look very different. And I would definitely encourage, if you want to know more, to look at our overdose fatality review report. We really tried to center the voice of families and the families of individuals who had, you know, lost a loved one to overdose in 2020 in this report, and the recommendations and telling people's story. And I think that gives us really some better insight into what's happening for folks. One of the things that we also saw were extreme racial disparities in our overdose deaths. You know, the Black community in Dane County were dying at over 3 times the rate of the white community due to overdoses. And when you look at the rest of the state, you look at Milwaukee County, you look at other larger counties, that's not a disparity that we're seeing mirrored. So it's not as if this is happening everywhere. It's something that's a little unique to Dane County. We know it is happening across the country too, but when you look at the rest of the state, it does lead us to ask, why is this happening in a resource-rich county like Dane County? These services and information and all of these things are not reaching people. And everybody's story is different, and there are some patterns, there are some commonalities, but really it's very, very different. Again, some of the folks who have passed in the last year have a long history of drug use, and there's others where it's the story you hear of, you know, college student took a pill at a party, thought it was Xanax or thought it was this, and it was actually pure fentanyl, and passed away, and nobody knew how to identify the signs of an overdose. Nobody had Narcan. There was nobody who could or did intervene to possibly save that person. So we see all the stories, and I think that's why we, you know, wanted to be here to just equip you all with some better tools to be able to respond, or maybe even be a venue to educate others. So Masami, next slide, because I know we're taking up a lot of your time and probably need to.
Sorry to take up my time, so good able to answer this question. Cocaine or meth, the stimulant users
Yeah.
are not opioid users, but fentanyl or other synthetics are mixed in these days, so they
Yeah.
show up as opioid deaths.
Yeah, that is a good point, Masami. Thank you for pointing that out, because that is the other big gap, is that people might think of, I don't use heroin, so none of this applies to me, or I'm not at risk, and that's really not the case, because we see fentanyl, which is the thing that's really driving a lot of these deaths, mixed into so many different products, and like Masami said, you know, meth is something that is picking back up again, is a drug that more people are using, and you know, they don't always know that the risk is there. So that's why we also try to do a lot of one-to-one education with people who access our syringe services locations. Oh no, thank you for that.
That's okay. Sure, one more?
I think when it's high schools, junior high schools, to educate these children on more education than they come about.
That's a good idea, yeah, no, nope, we're here, yeah. So fentanyl, is a driver of a lot of the deaths. I believe it's involved in 91% of the fatal deaths. Of the fatal overdoses, the deaths, due to overdoses, because it's inexpensive, it's added to everything. And even as Julie said and Masami said, into things where people are looking for a stimulant effect, or you would think they would be for cocaine or methamphetamine. But because my teaching is that fentanyl is as inexpensive as sugar, basically. That's like one of the ways I teach people about it. Like, because it's manufactured, it can be made anywhere, it's easy to get, it's cheap. So if people could cut along the distribution routes that, you know, that drugs are distributed, if they could cut it with something as inexpensive as sugar and increase profits somewhere along the way, that would happen, right? But, you know, people can detect sugar very easily in their product. Fentanyl has the added benefit not only of being inexpensive, so it stretches your profit margin, but it is also does have an effect. It has can cause a euphoria or an effect, so people might think, oh, this drug is really good or whatever, even though it's the opposite effect of someone who's seeking meth or cocaine might want. And then the problem is when people don't have when someone who thinks of themselves as, or they basically are a stimulant seeker, they have no experience or no tolerance for opiates, so it's really extra dangerous for those folks. So we try to get to them and be like, you know, convince people that it's possible that fentanyl could be in any powder or paste, you know, that is sold, even if you don't think it is.
And I will just jump in one more time because, gosh, I was like, let's hurry along and tell you some of these other things. But I think you all will kind of appreciate this a little bit. We often get asked, like, why would a dealer or someone who is making these drugs want to put fentanyl in their products if it's going to potentially kill their customers? And I always keep saying, like, again, these things are not regulated. This isn't, you know, like a restaurant where there are standards and regulations of how you prepare a product, what you have to do to clean that surface before, you know, before I mix like my fish and my chicken and my shrimp. None of that exists for this type of preparation, right? And so we have heard a lot from some of the staff we work with in the narcotics task force, where they're like, sometimes it's just simple like site cross-contamination because they have not cleaned their space that they are preparing these drugs or packaging them well enough. So again, we are like, it's not always intentional, and there are times when the people who are making or selling the drugs may not even know the level of cross-contamination that's happening in products. So again, I just kind of put that out there. I know you all might have some more experience with what that would look like. Okay.
Okay, are we good now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So recognizing overdose, like if you've, it depends on your situation. Obviously, if you spent time with someone before they, you know, pass out or become unconscious, you might have knowledge of what they've been doing or not doing or whatever. But if you're talking about a situation where you just see somebody who might appear to be unconscious, there are long lists of things about pallor and skin color and stuff like that, or breathing and not breathing. It might look like sleeping. It's hard at a distance or at any distance to tell if a person may be breathing or not, but there can be attempts to breathe while a person is unconscious. So it might look like, okay, their chest is moving, so they're fine. I'm just gonna leave them alone or whatever. But unfortunately, it's not as clear cut as that, because everybody's body sort of responds differently. So what I try to bottom line it for people is they're unresponsive. So that means that they're not responding to either their name, if you know them, or hey you in their ear. Like, so if they're not responding to that in some way, or shaking. Now, and if you're shaking somebody that you don't know, right? Like if you just, like, you know, the classic situation where you see someone who looks like they're sleeping, are they really sleeping? You can just walk up to them. Can I come up behind you? Like you really wouldn't want to like loom over somebody and like start scaring them, but what you'd want to do is kind of like come up from the side, so you're not like in front of them threatening them, and give them a shake, like a good shake on the shoulder, right? And generally speaking, I feel like I can assume that most of us in this room have seen someone who's had too much to drink in their lives, right? So somebody who's had way too much alcohol, they may appear to be sleeping, but if you give them a good shake, yell their name or say, hey you, they'll respond in some way. Another intervention that I recommend to people is taking your knuckles and rubbing their sternum, because that's painful. But you're not actually hurting them, but you can feel pain there. So anybody who's really sleeping is going to try to get away from you, or like, stop, you know, like get away. And then that means if they do respond, then they're not unresponsive. So they're still alive, they're still fighting, they're still breathing. So when somebody is unresponsive, means unconscious. So they're not responding to your yelling, and they're not responding to your shaking, then you say that's unresponsive. So I hope that helps to like distinguish. That's really the nuts and bolts of distinguishing between where somebody might be, because we do see people sleeping in public. I mean, I don't know, I feel like I see it all the time. There's even more people, talk about an increase, there's even more people these days who are houseless, have no place to live, and that's a really exhausting life. So people might be sleeping at odd hours. So if you were to shake a person who's sleeping, even if they're sleeping very deeply, they're going to respond in some way. And then if they're just sleeping, you don't have to give them Narcan, basically. Or call, like sleeping in public is not a reason to summon 911, right? I mean, it might be a problem for the property owner or something like that, but it's not a reason to call paramedics. Does that make sense? Okay. So unresponsive means unconscious. So you can go to the next slide. And so once you've determined that a person is unresponsive, ask them if they're okay, shake, yell. If no response, the number one thing you do is remain calm, right? I mean, that's emergencies 101, right? Like, there's no reason to panic. The first thing to do is to call 911 from your cell phone, and then report the location of the unconscious person. So if you've never called 911 before, this is our basic duty as people, is to report that somebody's unconscious. So when you call 911, the first question is, what's the location of your emergency? So you would give them, to the best of your knowledge, the address that you're at. And if you can't give them an address, you describe the location. And 911 operators they answer calls like this all the time, so they will talk you through what to do next. If you're panicking or whatever, they might ask you if you see a street sign or a business, that type of thing, to identify the location so they can send emergency responders. So my third direction is to follow directions of the 911 operator. If you have Narcan on you, you could, and you've determined that the person is unconscious. If you give Narcan to somebody who is not having an overdose, it's not going to help them. So for example, if they're unconscious because of alcohol, or they're unconscious because of a diabetic coma or something like that, it is not actually going to help them, but it also isn't going to hurt them, right? So it's not gonna cause anything to be worse about their seizure or whatever's going on, whatever reason why they're unconscious. It's just not going to rescue them. Does that make sense? So it's like a do no harm approach. And that's why a lot of people carry it, because it isn't even causing as much harm as like chest compressions might on somebody. It's not literally doing them no harm. So the package looks like, I think the next slide has the packaging on it. And I have kits here, you know, if you guys want to have some. So you would just open the package, open the inner seal, and then you end up with something like this. A little, I can pass these around. I thought I had two. Oh, there it is, yes. So you can pass these around so you can handle them if you'd like. But basically it's a spray that's in this little pump thing. You would place it in the person's nostril.
They're just trainers. You can...
Yeah. Those are just dummies. So push the button. When I do a quick training with somebody, I usually say the way to do it wrong is to either not put it in their nose. So like if you were to put it in their ear or something, and push the button, it's not going to have any effect. It's not going to hurt them, but it's not going to have any effect. And then also, if you don't wait till you get to their nostril and you discharge it in the air, once you push that button, it's gone. It shoots out like I usually like to say bug spray or hairspray. It like shoots out about 18 inches, and then it's gone from this. So the kit has 2 doses though. So if you do misfire or whatever, there's a second dose. So it's really the reason that this is promoted and stuff like that is because it's easy for the for the bystander to use. It's very easy. It's almost foolproof. It's similar to like an EpiPen in that sense. It's easy to use even if you're, unsure of what you're doing or you're panicking or whatever. It's easy to use. So that's why we promote it that way. So each box has 2, and they have an inner seal in addition to this box, so it doesn't, the packaging just keeps it together even when you drop it. It's not breakable, which is handy. But the inner seal is like the blister pack that's protecting the just like this. The inner foil pack is protecting it. So if you were to take it out of that, it will eventually evaporate. So that's what's keeping it ready to use, is the inner foil seal.
Is it temperature sensitive?
Very good question. Did you see my notes? That's actually a great prompt for the next question. So is it temperature sensitive? So a lot of people are like, this is great. I'll just keep this in the glove box in my compartment, in my car. So just in case I'm somewhere. Well, I mean, that's a great idea, and I love that you want to be that responsive. Unfortunately, our cars are not a protected environment at all. So in the summertime, I mean, we have extreme weather in Wisconsin. This is usually what I say. We have such extreme weather, so in the summertime, it's going to get over 100 degrees in your car very easily, even perhaps on a day like today. And then in the wintertime, obviously it freezes in your car. So that's not good for this stuff. It's not as I always am searching for the best metaphor. It's not quite like a puppy or a human baby or a tuna sandwich. Cause you could leave it in your car for like an hour or something, right? It can be exposed to extreme temperatures, but it can't be stored at extreme temperatures. So it's okay if you leave it in your car while you're inside doing a visit for an hour, that's fine. But if you're gonna be inside for, half a day or something like that, you wanna just take it with you. Move it out from your car, from the little oven and freezer that your car becomes in Wisconsin. Does that make sense? Great.
So like your pocket, a purse, a backpack, those would all be great places to have it.
So,
Yeah.
you pull this out, after identify they're unconscious, you call 911, and then you put it in the person's nose and you squeeze. And you said and then what happens? Like, do they, or you don't know, or there's a second dose available?
There is. Sometimes, it usually does, how it affects, the person's body is the naloxone, that's the name of the drug. It, gets into the bloodstream and it goes to the brain, and it slides in and blocks the opiate receptors in the brain. Now that the opiate receptors aren't right here, but this is always what I do. I'm like, the opiate receptors at the top of your head, but the drug, the chemical gets in and blocks the opiate receptors in your brain and kicks out all the opiates that are there. So that way the body can, the person might need rescue breaths if they've been out a while, but the body's natural urge to breathe kicks in again, is able to kick in again. So they may start breathing again. That kicking out of the opiates is temporary. So that's why I always highlight calling 911. Because in the ideal world, then the person is transported to the ER or urgent care or whatever, and is monitored for 6 to 8 hours. Their withdrawal symptoms, if they have their withdrawal symptoms can be managed by medications, so they're not feeling awful from having the opiates kicked out of their system, out of their brain. And then they can also be revived again, because the near fatal dose of opiates is still circulating in the bloodstream at that point. It's just not affecting the brain and the urge to breathe. So then once the Narcan or the naloxone wears off, that fatal dose or near fatal dose is still circulating and can impact the ability to breathe again. So ideally the person is transported and then supervised for 6 to 8 hours. So it's generally, it's not an instantaneous, it could be an instantaneous like waking up, but we advise people usually, and again, ideally you'll be on the phone with the 911 operator and they will talk you through the next steps. But what we tell people is to wait at least 2 minutes to see if it works. And 2 minutes when you're with somebody who's not breathing, even if it's a stranger, that does seem like a long time. So that's why it's ideal to be on the phone with a 911 operator who's trained to like help you time the second dose. Now, a second dose is not going to harm the person, but especially if they're like a long-term user, it's not ideal to over Narcan somebody, but like being on the phone with 911 is ideal.
Yeah, and I think to like what Kathy was saying, sometimes if someone has taken quite a large quantity of the drug, you may need more than one dose to revive them, to kind of kick those things out to where they are in that state that they're breathing, and we're not as concerned about like an immediate fatality happening. But everybody's kind of different in how they respond and come out of an overdose. Some people, like Kathy said, it's like a waking up, or it's just like the breathing kicks back in and they still kind of stay in that almost like sleep state. There's others where it makes them feel really sick, and so like she said, having some other medical personnel that can kind of come and assist and make sure that person is okay or doesn't fall back into an overdose state because they have taken quite a bit, is always what we recommend. And in any of these situations, we always say, do what is most comfortable for you. We have kind of a good, better, best model when it comes to how to respond to an overdose. It's like, good would be call 911, give them Narcan. Better would be call 911, give them Narcan, and do, like rescue breaths. And, best would be this bigger list of things to do, right? And we know that that's not going to be comfortable for everyone. You may not be comfortable reviving a stranger, or this person is 6'8" and very, very big, and I'm worried that they're going to come out of this overdose and be very, very confused, and I'm not going to be able to handle that situation. That is okay. You do not need to handle that situation. That's why we say the best thing to do is call 911, so that they or the members of the Madison Cares team who have paramedics and others who deal with behavioral health and substance use issues like this, may not be sending police or others, also have providers, treatment providers with them on their team, can really kind of come and deal with the situation. You've done your part to intervene and hopefully keep someone alive. There are things beyond that that you're just not going to be equipped to handle, and it's better that a trained professional do it. So
just a quick time check, we're
Yeah.
almost at time.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, you're totally fine, but I
But I got
really
through it.
I wanna make sure that we get through the important
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
Like what to do if there was an overdose here that you, stumbled upon in the bathroom here. And I don't have Narcan, but I wanna go get it and I wanna get help. And those are some of the questions that staff have had that I hope that we get answered.
Okay, good. And Eric, you had a question real quick?
Yeah, so I have a question. When I'm watching the video and hearing you talk about rescue breaths. So it's different from a CPR situation where the last time I took it, I was taught that the chest compressions are the most important part to get, blood circulating. So you do need to do rescue breaths for someone, you're reviving after giving Narcan.
Well, again, like every situation will be different. This is why ideally you're on the phone with 911 and they're telling you what to do, in terms of the person's response. Yeah, and there's good, better, best, like what you're comfortable doing and if they're not breathing after, 2 shots of Narcan and for whatever reason, emergency response is pretty fast to our buildings. I mean, I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but they know our buildings, they're City of Madison or Dane County properties. They come here often anyways, so like response is usually pretty fast.
And I do think that video that's linked in the agenda and that I sent out an email, at the end of the video, they talk about that and do a demonstration of that. So you can relook at that video too.
And to answer Bonnie's question about where can you get all these things, what, you want to be equipped with them. We did bring Narcan today, so anybody who wants some is welcome to take it with them. We also have more upstairs, so if you want to take more than what we brought down, we can come on down and bring you some more to take with you. If you ever need to restock, upstairs, the syringe services program office is just right in kind of reception. Is that 2010? 2010. I always invert the numbers. In 2010, we have Narcan. We also have recently gotten CPR face masks. So if those are things you would also like to carry with you, we do have those available. We also have the same supply at our East Washington office, and again, syringe services at East Washington. When you walk right in reception, you'll see kind of reception desk this way, and the syringe services is kind of the first thing to your right when you walk in the door, and there is a sign there. So we are able to stock you up. If you want to get brochures or want to have something to carry with you to remind you how to administer Narcan, we do have brochures on recognizing signs of overdose. We have brochures on how to administer Narcan and what you should do. We also have brochures that have, different community-based resources. So these are things that you can either carry on your own, or if, again, when you're out in the field, working with our different operators and licensed establishments, if you have things that you want to give to any of those folks, we can also take care of that as well. We have businesses, we have security companies, we have a number of folks who come to us to get Narcan for their businesses. I know we've had some inquiries from different restaurants to get their staff trained, so we can do an in-person or virtual training for staff, for anyone's staff, give them a kind of regular supply of Narcan, brochures, pretty much whatever they want and need, we try to take care of for them, so.
So a kit is also co-located with the AED at East and at South. So if you know where the AED or the all-electric, automatic electrified defibrillator, there's a kit of Narcan in there too. And I always freshen it up every time
Is there a way that for like the environmental health division that's down the hallway, can we get a supply of each of those down there, or does it have to be kept?
No.
Because I
No,
think it would be
it's
nice
just a
to
nice
have
central
the
location.
supply in our area, so when you're coming and going, you can grab it, put it in your backpack and have it when you're in the community. So we would appreciate that.
One thing we could also do is, we are trying to launch a program with EMS called Leave Behind. So, you know, they respond to a scene, they have what would be like an overdose prevention or overdose rescue kit that they could leave with the individual or loved ones. We could also have some of those available too for EH if anybody would like to carry them on them. You know, again, it's kind of a canvas bag. It has the CPR breathing mask, fentanyl test strips, Narcan, gloves, and then some of the instructions on how to use these things, plus any resources for treatment recovery or supports that people might be looking for, so.
I was
Jessica,
able
question.
to, well, on that part, but I was gonna say here, I don't necessarily will say, it is fun as far as several people, as far as in and around the working areas. Does he have something available to him? Okay, great.
Yeah, as of now, he has Narcan on him as well.
Okay.
And I know, cause I know he's had to respond before, so.
Right.
He should have it on him if you're down here and need help.
Okay.
And he does, he goes, I mean, he goes around checking vehicles, he does the grounds, he does all of it. I don't know,
He's a great resource.
yeah, and Evo has,
Yep.
these guys.
Okay, we have time for one last
Sorry.
question.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Do we give out Narcan with the syringe service program?
Oh, yes, that's the vast majority. We give out between 300 and 400 kits a month to people who use, because it's obviously the most useful place for it to be, is with people who use drugs and their friends and family, right? Because they're like they spend a lot more time with each other. And on that note, like if you do take some with you today, what I'm gonna do, I mean, I don't know if you're gonna have an annual meeting again about this time next year though, even though this doesn't expire until 2025, what I'm gonna remind you to do I'm gonna probably send you an email or even come to your next meeting and be like, okay, so if you took Narcan a year ago, you haven't used it yet, let's swap it out with fresh stuff. Because I can always, we have people who come and basically are Narcanning their friends or family, daily, a lot, really often, they use it a lot. So, having it a year, closer to the expiration date, is not a problem for them. But, in this, each kit, I mean, not to put a dollar amount on it, but each kit is $75. Which is nothing compared to saving a life, right? Like $75 versus saving someone's life, it's priceless. But it is kind of, in my like little Midwestern mind, it is kind of a lot of money if it's just gonna gather dust in the back of somebody's drawer. It's kind of a waste. So I always want to be swapping it out if you don't find yourself using it. I just want to swap it out annually so that you guys have the fresh stuff if you're just carrying it around just in case. And I'm giving the slightly older stuff to people who are using it all the time. Does that make sense?
And if it's the same, if you find that you have some and it's expired, just bring it back to us or let us know.
There is a use for expired Narcan,
yeah.
so don't just throw it away.
Yeah, interdee it to us if that's easier to you, or drop it off, because we do have a national company we know of who takes expired Narcan and can recycle and do other things with it. So we're happy to take back the expired, we're happy to swap out for fresh. We get a lot of our Narcan through the State Department of Health Services through a program, so we are actually tracking almost everything that goes out the door, who we're training, all of those things. So again, we're happy to swap things out, we're happy to take expired stuff back. We go through a lot of Narcan, I'll just say that. Quite a bit, actually. And thank you all for being a great audience. Sorry, Bonnie, that we went way over, but we had a lot of questions. Glad we answered. If you have anything else you're curious about, or you're like, I know nothing about drugs, is this a dumb question? It's not a dumb question. Come ask one of us. Send us a Skype, email us. We're happy to talk to you and to answer anything that might come up. So thank you.
All of you grab some food to go. There's lots of food. There's grab and go food. So